Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of source material articles, research, personal notes, and really just try to filter it down to the surprising nuggets of knowledge that genuinely stick with you.
And our mission today, well, it takes us deep into the heart of London.
To one of its most famous, most colorful, and, as it turns out, historically bizarre locations, Portobello Road.
It's a place everyone thinks they know. You know, the antiques, the market, all that vibrant noise.
Yeah.
But what our sources show is that this street is a living, breathing microcosm of some pretty extreme psychological and financial contrasts.
Okay.
It's this chaotic backdrop for stories of secret addiction, devastating trauma, and even accidental tragedy.
And we can't even begin this deep dive without unpacking the street's name itself, because its origin story is so outlandish, it just sets the stage perfectly for the bizarre narratives we're about to explore.
It really does.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The name, Portobello, is a commemoration of Admiral Vernon's 1739 capture of the Spanish city of Portobello in the Caribbean.
And if you're asking yourself, why did 18th century Britain decide to launch this massive, really costly military operation against a pretty minor Spanish port in Panama?
Right. What's the big deal?
The answer is simultaneously simple and just. Unbelievable. A severed ear.
A severed ear? It sounds like a joke. It's almost a cartoonish historical fact.
But it's not. We're talking about Captain Robert Jenkins, who stood before the House of Commons
In front of everyone.
and famously presented his own amputated ear, which he claimed Spanish Coast Guards had cut off after they pillaged his ship.
And this wasn't just, some piece of evidence. This became a symbol of national humiliation.
Exactly. It triggered a huge wave of public outrage. This one single visceral act of a politician holding up human remains was the tipping point that lawmakers needed to justify going to war with Spain.
And it launched Britain into the conflict known incredibly as the War of Jenkins's Ear.
I mean, you couldn't make it up.
So, because of a political crisis sparked by a mutilated ear in 1739, a landowner in Notting Hill, decades later, names his property Portobello Farm after the victory.
And that little lane eventually became the winding, chaotic street we know today.
Its history built on outrage and political theater.
And that heritage of chaos, vibrancy, and these hidden histories is the perfect foundation for the area's modern identity. Our sources describe Portobello Road as a centipede of a street.
A centipede, I like that.
Yeah, long, thin, winding, vibrant, brilliant in color, noisy, selling everything imaginable from, high-end, genuine antiques that cost a fortune to questionable exotic food stalls.
Right.
But crucially, as one source noted, it possesses an indefinable edge.
That edge, that razor-thin line between crippling poverty and astonishing wealth, between sanity and, self-destruction, is what we're diving into today. We're looking at three profoundly connected lives. A wealthy art dealer who's masking a devastating secret addiction.
A man grappling with a lifetime of guilt from a profound childhood trauma.
And a small-time criminal whose destiny is accidentally determined by arson.
And here's the twist that kind of weaves all these lives together. All three characters are linked by a single lost item, a misplaced envelope.
An envelope with what inside?
A simple yet very specific amount of money, 115 pounds.
So that's the thread.
That's the thread. Our deep dive is into the universal theme. These sources highlight the high cost of denial and the extreme, sometimes mad lengths people go to escape their own psychological realities.
Okay, let's start at the top then. In the rarefied air surrounding Eugene Wren, a man who, on the surface, should be the picture of success.
He really should. He epitomizes that Portobello Road success story, but the sources, they quickly show us his internal life is a complete mess of anxiety and secrecy.
And his story, his ascent, it begins with his father, Arnold.
Right, who started humbly on Portobello Road. Arnold's transformation from just a, comfortable local shop owner to a major art player was triggered by an almost mystical moment of artistic revelation.
He saw the works of the Swiss symbolist Arnold Buckland.
Yes, particularly the Isle of the Dead, and they absolutely haunted him.
And it's important to understand symbolism here. Buckland's paintings are intensely psychological. They focus on myth, death, solitude.
And the Isle of the Dead depicts a solitary figure being rowed toward this dark, rocky island lined with cypress trees.
It's the ultimate representation of isolation and finality. It really tapped into something deep within Arnold.
And what's fascinating is how that deep, introspective inspiration leads to a highly lucrative business transaction.
Right. He doesn't just admire it.
No. Arnold, rooting through some stacks of art, discovers a painting that has the sort of the scent of Buckland's influence about it. It depicts a mermaid or an undine.
Swimming desperately inside a confining, narrow-necked glass vase. A goldfish bowl, basically.
A goldfish bowl, exactly. So we have a clear theme of isolation and drowning right there.
Arnold called it Undine in a goldfish bowl. He took it to an expert who was 99% certain it was a Buckland.
But Arnold, being surprisingly honest in a market built on artifice, he passes that uncertainty along to the potential buyer.
Morris Stemmer,
who is, ironically, the father of Joel Roseman, whom we'll meet later.
And Stemmer was rich, arrogant, considered himself infallible in art matters. He declared himself 100% certain of the authenticity.
And he paid Arnold a truly astounding sum of price, beyond one's wildest dreams.
And that one single transaction bought the Wrens a new life. It elevated them from Chesterton Road to the opulence of Chepstow Villas, just off the Market Street.
And Eugene, the son, he continued that upward trajectory. He moved the business entirely off the market, rebranded it Eugene Wren Fine Art.
And settled on Kensington Church Street, the epitome of upscale gallery life.
Right. He was sophisticated, witty, he had a flair for spotting trends, making him incredibly wealthy.
But the sources reveal a foundational issue with him. Eugene is intensely private, secretive by nature, almost pathologically so.
His mind, like his house in Chepstow Villas, is guarded. It's full of secret drawers and locked boxes.
And this need for absolute control and secrecy manifested early in life in some pretty destructive habits.
Right. We know he had an addictive personality that he managed to conquer. He was a severe alcoholic. Vodka was his poison.
And a 40-a-day smoker.
He overcame both. But the underlying psychological tendency, that deep need for a secret retreat, it never left him.
So what replaces the vodka and the cigarettes?
Something truly absurd for a man of his standing. An addiction to sugar-free sweets.
Sugar-free sweets.
Specifically chocorange, later renamed oranchoco. For the sophisticated art dealer, his chemical retreat is a low-calorie pastille.
It's the contract that makes this so compelling, and he tried to rationalize it at first.
Of course.
He wanted a harmless appetite suppressant. After all, they are tooth-friendly, healthy, and contain only 4 calories per pastille.
He used them to stave off genuine hunger, keeping his weight down and avoiding grazing on proper food.
But the synthetic taste was chemically perfect. A rich chocolate flavor with a hint of sharp citrus, without that usual bitter aftertaste of older sugar substitutes.
So this wasn't just curbing his hunger anymore. It became a craving. It escalated rapidly from 1 or 2 pastilles to 3 or 4 in the morning.
And then sometimes half a packet devoured in a single afternoon.
The moment the sweets stopped being a tool for control and became the object of desire, they transformed it to a source of intense shame for him.
He viewed this craving as far more humiliating than his past drinking.
Oh, absolutely. Drinking vodka could be seen as tragic or, bohemian for an art dealer.
Right, there's a certain romance to it. But a sugar-free sweet addiction, it was just pathetic.
He equated it to a dependency on hard drugs.
And that shame drove an elaborate, secretive routine.
To avoid his gallery staff or local acquaintances noticing his habits, he went to extreme lengths. He wouldn't make eye contact in his own gallery.
He visited multiple chain pharmacies, elixir stores in Paddington, Goulburn Road, Marylebone, in widely different neighborhoods.
All just so the pharmacy assistants wouldn't comment on his frequent purchases. Can you imagine the anxiety?
He compared this subterfuge to the secret drinker with a hip flask.
Because he knew that if people saw him desperately seeking an addictive substance, they'd assume cocaine, or at least marijuana, something worthy of his wealthy milieu.
They'd never suspect the source of his degradation was oranchoco.
And he even invented excuses for his fiancée, Ella, claiming he had a persistent sore throat.
The sources highlight how crucial Ella is here. She is a very perceptive GP.
And she eventually noticed the erratic behavior and the slight, inexplicable residue of citrus and artificial sweetener on his breath. The secret couldn't hold.
She started finding his caches.
His hiding spots.
He had hidden them behind the E.M. Forster novels on the drawing room bookshelves.
A nice literary touch, using high culture to hide a low addiction.
He found the hiding places in a decorative frieze that concealed a secret kitchen drawer and the spare bathroom cabinet.
And Ella, trying to preserve the relationship, she tries to dismiss it as minor, calling it a harmless habit, like a man addicted to mint imperials.
But that very public exposure, the shattering of his intricate web of secrecy, was too much for Eugene.
This is where it gets really interesting and painful.
Eugene is forced to confront the true psychological depth of his addiction. He realizes with terrifying clarity, that he feared preferring the sweet, solitary ritual of the chakranj to lovemaking with Ella.
Wow.
His need for control and private pleasure was actively sabotaging intimacy.
The revelation is immediate and catastrophic for him. He breaks off their engagement.
And immediately flees to a hotel.
In his mind, his addiction, his failure of self-control, has rendered him morally and psychologically incapable of marriage and happiness. He chose flight over facing the intimate truth.
So we have this period of withdrawal and isolation in a hotel room, a high-stakes moment for his mental fortitude.
But our sources reveal his recovery isn't a victory of willpower at all. It's an accident.
The ultimate irony.
He falls violently ill with a severe virus or flu. The symptoms are so acute, vomiting, fever, a complete loss of appetite, that the mere thought of consuming a synthetic rich chocolate and citrus pastille makes his stomach turn.
So physical illness succeeds where mental fortitude failed.
Yes, the virus literally deprived him of the ability to eat them, breaking the neurological dependency loop. He wakes up one day with the joyous, startling realization that he is finally over it.
He was cured not by therapy or strength, but by a fever and a terrible stomach bug.
The high-stakes psychological drama was solved by basic biology.
Okay, now we execute a sharp pivot. We move from the sterile, secretive opulence of Chepstow villas in Kensington
to the utter squalor facing Lance Platt, a small-time criminal driven by immediate base necessity and defined by almost unbelievable bad luck.
Lance lives in appalling conditions in Blagrove Road. This is a property owned by his late wife's great-nephew, Uncle Gib.
And it's a house right up against the rumbling, elevated Westway train line. It's dirty, cold, and rat-infested.
Uncle Gib even boasts that the house hasn't been redecorated since 1965.
Yeah, he treats it like a time capsule of neglect.
So Lance is living this precarious sub-life, relying on benefits and paying rent to Gib, who is just exploiting Lance's desperation for shelter.
And crucially, Lance's immediate motivation for crime isn't career ambition or even pure greed. It's a failed attempt at reconciliation with his on-again, off-again girlfriend, Gemma.
He needs £1,000, a massive sum for someone in his position, to pay for her dental implant.
And why does she need a dental implant?
Because Lance knocked that tooth out during a drunken argument after she accused him of being an unemployable layabout.
So the irony is, he's trying to be responsible for the damage he caused, but the method he chooses is petty crime.
Exactly. And this quest for quick cash is precisely what throws him directly into the orbit of Eugene Wren.
This is the moment.
This is the moment where the 115 pounds links our first two characters. Remember, Eugene found a bulging envelope of cash after Joel Roseman was mugged.
And Eugene, with a characteristic, perhaps slightly narcissistic, desire to be seen as the upright man, posted a notice.
The notice appealed for the loser to come forward and state the correct sum, somewhere between 80 and 160 pounds, to prove ownership.
And Lance, desperate, sees this as a potential lifeline. He calls Eugene and is invited to Chepstow Villas.
This scene, detailed in the sources, is pure dramatic irony and contrast. Lance, shuffling in from the cold, rat-infested squalor of Blagrove Road,
walks into Eugene's house opulent, filled with valuable art, crystal, gilded mirrors.
He is utterly overwhelmed by the wealth and the clean, controlled atmosphere.
And Eugene, of course, is performing the role of the moral gatekeeper, holding the lost property hostage until the owner can prove it.
He stares down the desperate, shifty-eyed Lance and asks for the precise sum.
And Lance, completely guessing and mentally fixated on numbers ending in 5, guesses
95.
And is immediately coldly dismissed by Eugene, who holds the true sum, 115 pounds, firmly in his pocket.
Lance misses his one clean shot at legitimate cash.
What's so tragic is that Lance was sincere in his attempt to retrieve the money he thought he had lost, even though he hadn't lost it at all.
He leaves disappointed, but he has seen the wealth, and he has mentally marked Eugene Wren's gallery on Kensington Church Street as a far more tempting, albeit difficult, target for a future burglary.
But before Lance can execute any major plan, fate steps in.
He is arrested and charged with a far worse crime: the murder of Doreen Lupescu and arson of his own house.
A crime he didn't commit, but one that was engineered by the chaos surrounding him.
And the true chaos was set in motion by Uncle Gib, the landlord.
Despite his newfound religious piety, he's an elder in Church of the Children of Zebulun Gib, is deeply cynical. He rents the derelict second-floor flat of the Blagrove Roadhouse to Doreen Lupescu.
An immigrant from Eastern Europe.
For 150 pounds a week.
For a derelict flat with no running water and access only to the outdoor toilet.
Yet for Dorian, who had been sleeping on a friend's floor, our sources say he viewed it as a palace.
That just highlights the stark desperation of life just a few streets away from Eugene's opulence.
Meanwhile, Fee's Gemma's current boyfriend, described with a distinctive mustache, and his accomplice Ian Pollitt decide Lance needs to pay for sleeping with Gemma before she moved in with Fee's.
So they hatch an amateur, malicious firebombing plot aimed solely at scaring or injuring Lance.
The detailed sequence of events on the night of the fire is remarkable because it hinges entirely on bad luck and timing. Fizz and Ian arrive.
They have siphoned petrol into a sparkling water bottle and brought a fireworks squib for ignition.
They shove the petrol-filled bottle through the letterbox.
They hear the glass smash inside. Fees lights his squib, ready to throw it through the opening, but before he can.
The house ignites with an immediate roar. The blast is instantaneous.
And the culprit wasn't the firebombing crew, but Uncle Gib.
Uncle Gib. He was awake due to severe indigestion, a consequence of eating rich, unaccustomed food at a church outing.
He had gone to the outdoor toilet, and he left his still smoldering cigarette in an ashtray tin resting on a pea-green wooden chair right in the hall.
So that tiny, innocuous ember, left by the pious man's indigestion, instantly detonated the petrol spilled from the broken bottle.
The tragedy is set in motion by a confluence of amateur crime and a poorly placed ashtray.
And Dorian Lupescu, the new tenant who thought he'd found a palace, dies quickly from smoke inhalation upstairs.
While Uncle Gib, having survived by being in the outdoor toilet, escapes through the back garden and feigns profound shock among the rat-infested grass and stinging nettles.
And later, he collects the insurance money for his write-off house, a calculated, fraudulent profit. He moves in with his church friends, the Perkinses, preparing for a new, cleaner life funded by tragedy.
And Lance.
He was miles away, committing his own crime. He was breaking into the house of Elizabeth Cherry nearby.
Our sources give us these wonderful, humanizing, and frankly clumsy details of his sloppy burglary.
He breaks a window, he steals jewelry and foreign currency, but crucially, he takes time out to eat her frosted chocolate cake.
Exactly. He is such an amateur, such a victim of desperation that mid-burglary he pauses for a child's comfort food.
Seeking solace in stolen chocolate cake, not realizing he is simultaneously building an alibi that will save his life.
When he returns, his house is a blackened ruin, and he is the obvious suspect, the known layabout and small-time crook.
The pressure on Lance is immense. He's arrested and charged with murder and arson.
And he debates revealing his burglary alibi, a true crime, just to avoid the capital charge of murder.
This dilemma perfectly encapsulates Uncle Gib's old belief that society cares more about property crime than violence.
Lance must weigh the certainty of a prison sentence for theft against the possibility of a life sentence for murder.
But the resolution doesn't come from Lance's moral choice. It comes from Fees, the original firebomber, whose conscience begins to torture him over the death of Dorian Lupescu.
An innocent man he never even knew existed.
When Fees suggests to his accomplice, Ian Pollitt, that they should confess, Ian reacts violently, stabbing Fees in the chest.
Fees, mouthful of Ian's blood after biting him during the struggle, escapes and eventually goes to the police.
Clearing his own conscience and inadvertently clearing Lance.
And Lance's fate. He is finally freed from the murder charge, using the break-in at Elizabeth Cherry's house as his confirmed alibi.
He's convicted of the theft, but avoids the far heavier charge. He finds the semblance of stability, getting a low-paying job as an assistant in a hardware shop.
Albeit one that pays below minimum wage.
Right. He trades potential decades in jail for a life of exploited honest labor. For Lance, that is a measure of success.
Now we delve into the deepest well of psychological pain in our sources, the story of Joel Roseman.
The son of the wealthy tycoon Morris Stemmer. Unlike Eugene, whose secrets were self-made, Joel's existence is defined entirely by one event that was not his fault, yet became his eternal burden.
That defining event was the drowning death of his younger sister, Amy, years earlier.
Joel was only 16, and he'd been assigned to watch her by the lake at their magnificent family estate, Mossbourne.
And he had fallen asleep after a massive picnic lunch. When he woke up, Amy was gone, caught tragically in the weed and reeds of the lake.
The response from his father, Morris Stemmer, was brutal and absolute. He banished Joel.
He refused to speak to him, holding him perpetually responsible for Amy's death.
But this wasn't a clean break. It was a punishment of separation combined with perpetual dependence.
Morris Stemmer forced Joel to legally change his surname to his mother's maiden name, Roseman.
Specifically saying he didn't want him called Stemmer anymore.
Yet, despite banishing him, he provided massive financial support.
This ensured Joel was cut off from his identity and his family connection, yet still tethered by a golden chain of dependence and guilt.
And Joel lives in a physical environment that mirrors his psychological state. The dark, gloomy Ludlow mansions flat in London.
His father bought the flat lock, stock, and barrel from an old lady, along with the heavy, cumbersome, mud-colored Victorian furniture. The whole place is an oppressive tomb.
He lives in profound darkness, physically manifesting his depression. The sources note his chronic tiredness. He sleeps much of the day and dreads the long, bright summer light.
He is perpetually hiding, just as Eugene Wren was hiding. But Joel is hiding from the sunlight, from the world, and from his own past.
And we circle back to segment one's art transaction here.
Oh, this is crucial. Joel must be constantly reminded of his trauma because his wealthy father, the man who banished him, kept a particular painting hanging in his house.
Arnold Wren's found mermaid, Undine in a goldfish bowl.
A picture of a woman swimming desperately inside a confining glass wall, symbolizing drowning.
Joel broods endlessly on this. How can his father, the man who blames him for a child drowning, hang a picture of a child drowning in his own home?
It's a deliberate, constant psychological torture, reinforcing the guilt.
And the psychological fracture deepens significantly after Joel suffers a heart attack and requires surgery.
This event leads him to Ella, who, before reconciling with Eugene, was acting as Joel's private doctor.
Post-up, Joel tells Ella about his near-death experience, claiming he went through a classic tunnel to a paradisal world.
His description of this world is vivid and archetypal. White marble towers, grassy fields, a broad shining river.
And angels with great white bird wings sitting on battlements. It sounds like heaven, or at least the city of the gods.
But he claims he didn't just visit. He brought something back.
He claims he brought back an entity, which he names Mithras.
Now, Mithras, historically, is associated with the Roman mystery cults, often depicted as a god of light, truth, and contracts, typically slaying a bull.
So Joel's appropriation of this figure, sometimes associated with divine light, is chilling given his personal darkness.
He even suggests this figure is perhaps an adult version of his imaginary childhood friend Jasper.
But Mithras is not a comforting figure. Joel feels him start to grow bigger and louder and stronger, threatening to absorb Joel entirely.
He likens it to the feeling of the child Alice in Wonderland who drinks something and grows so huge she fills the house. He is terrified of being completely subsumed by this creature of his mind.
And the terror reaches a peak when he worries about what Mithras might demand of him.
Right. He fears Mithras will start telling him to commit violent crimes like killing red-headed people.
A desperate, slightly macabre jab at his therapist, Miss Crane, who has red hair.
The delusion is not just replacing him, it's threatening to make him dangerous.
So that desperation drives him to try to induce a second near-death experience.
He attempts an overdose of pills and vodka, stolen from his mother, hoping to return Mithras to his glorious city.
Hela saves him, stabilizing him, but the experience leaves him withdrawn and hauntingly quiet.
This attempt, however, it triggers the key psychological shift necessary for his resolution.
After the overdose, Joel starts seeing the landscape of his beautiful NDE world, the white columns and turrets, as being strangely similar to Mossbourne, the very house where Amy drowned.
He starts to acknowledge the blurring of his afterlife vision and his scene of profound trauma. He tells Ella, hell is beautiful, you know, it's not all ugly and burning up like those old writers said.
So the idealized city of angels and light is, in his mind, inseparable from the scene of the tragedy that destroyed his life. He's beginning to synthesize his guilt with his delusion.
The transformation is completed when he makes the shift external and absolute. He dyes his hair yellow, matching his description of Mithras.
He speaks in a quiet monotone and insists on being called Mithras.
He is essentially trading his identity as Joel Roseman, the guilty son, for the identity of the mythical god.
And this leads to the ultimate and perhaps most disturbing resolution in our source material.
Morris Stemmer, the wealthy and unforgiving father, is finally reconciled.
He comes to Joel's dark flat, listens to this new yellow-haired entity, and says chillingly the exact words that allow forgiveness.
This isn't my son, this is someone else.
Because Joel, the guilty son who caused the daughter's death, is gone.
Replaced by a divine exile, the father can finally accept him.
Hmm.
The burden of guilt is lifted because the person carrying the guilt has ceased to exist.
So Morris Stemmer moves Mithras Joel back into the family's opulent Hampstead Garden suburb mansion, sparing no expense for psychiatric nurses and constant care.
And the identity shift grants Joel peace and, more importantly, forgiveness from the father he so desperately craved it from.
Mithras is described as sunny-tempered, even playful, preferring the twilight, and is a wistful exile of his glorious city.
It's the ultimate psychological trade-off. To survive the impossible weight of parental blame and survivor's guilt, the son had to completely erase his original self and replace it with a delusion that was acceptable to his unforgiving patriarch.
It is the sheer chaotic vibrancy and the wild psychological extremes of Portobello Road that created the perfect ecosystem for these three deeply interwoven yet distinct dramas to unfold.
I think so.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, all three of these men were attempting to solve an internal problem, guilt, shame, or desperation, with an external, often self-destructive coping mechanism.
So where does this leave our characters? Eugene Wren and Ella reconcile.
Having moved past the secret addiction that threatened to destroy their engagement, they marry quietly, and Ella becomes pregnant.
They're moving forward, having overcome the dependency that Eugene found so profoundly humiliating.
And Lance, the unlikely focus of a murder investigation, is cleared, thanks to Fuzz's confession and his own timely, if sloppy, alibi of stealing a cake.
He treats chaos for stability, finding a measure of success in exploited but honest labor at the hardware shop.
But the core thread connecting these stories remains the high cost of denial and the extreme lengths people go to shed an intolerable reality.
Eugene sought oblivion and control in a harmless suite.
Lance sought basic survival and reconciliation through petty theft.
And Joel found peace by literally trading his identity to become a mythical figure.
The most powerful and arguably most chilling resolution belongs to Joel. He could not find forgiveness or self-acceptance as the guilt-ridden, banished son.
The only way for the system of blame and trauma to be broken was for Joel Roseman to be replaced by Mithras, the wistful exile.
This forces us to confront the nature of self-preservation.
Eugene ultimately beat his psychological addiction through a physical illness. A virus literally detoxed him.
Joel escaped his childhood trauma through a profound psychological break, becoming Mithras.
And Lance escaped murder charges through the chaos and guilt of others.
This raises an important question for all of us looking at these extremes. In a world of overwhelming pressures, guilt, and unbearable burdens, whether they come from a past trauma or an overwhelming need for control, what methods, whether healthy, compulsive, or utterly mad, do we use to shed the parts of ourselves we can no longer bear to be?
It's a heavy thought to end on.
This has been the deep dive into Portobello's darkest secrets and the high price of self-preservation. Until next time.